And the honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To most of the people in my community, and I am sure this is true for most Canadians, government is government. That is to say that in our daily lives, we don't distinguish between municipal, provincial, and federal levels of government. And we know that research has actually borne this out, that when someone has had a bad experience or struggles to get a service to which they are entitled, that frustrating, confusing experience translates to their government isn't helpful. So what this means is that people don't say the provincial government and that department of fill in the blank isn't helpful, or the federal government and Service Canada isn't helpful. What happens to citizens is that their negative experience gets attributed to all governments. And that makes sense, because people's lives aren't divided into compartments or neat boxes along jurisdictional lines or departmental lines. Jurisdictions and departments are there to help governments deliver services, to meet mandates as vehicles to implement policies and laws. We also know that when someone is accessing service from the government, they don't distinguish distinct points along a process and say things like, my phone call was answered right away, that was good service, and then say, but the application process was horrific and complicated. What they say is that the entire journey of the process wasn't good, or was difficult, or confusing, regardless of whether along the way there was good and helpful service. This is what the research and evidence tells us. Which brings me to the topic we're discussing today, and that is improving the journey for people living with a disability when accessing services and benefits provided by their government. Currently, if you went to the government website to apply for Canada Pension Plan Disability, you'd be confronted with 8 documents totaling 45 pages. 17 of those pages are a guide, so 28 pages need to be filled in to apply for the Canada Pension Plan Disability. That sounds like a pretty intense and thorough process. And if we put aside some of the difficulties associated with understanding the questions on the application, that could be for another bill on another day on plain language and applications, the application sounds like the gold standard to me for determining someone's eligibility for disability benefits. Bill C348 would eliminate the onerous burden of multiple forms and duplication for Canadians with disabilities. Once an individual has completed an application and is determined to be eligible for disability benefits, we shouldn't put them through a government application process over and over and over again to prove they have a disability. Through this bill, my colleague from Windsor, Tecumseh, is trying to ensure that people with a disability get the benefits they're entitled to without the demoralizing, disrespectful, costly, and time-consuming process of having to prove over and over again that they have a disability. This bill, I think, is brilliant in its simplicity and brilliant in the actual positive impact it would have in people's lives. And sometimes it really is the smallest gestures that can make the biggest change in people's lives. I don't want anyone to get me wrong. Parliamentarians in our government have a lot of work to do to address the high level of poverty among people living with disabilities. My honourable colleague reminded us in her introductory speech on the bill of just that. 5.3 million Canadians live with some form of disability, and the poverty rate for persons living with disability is high, much higher than those from the general population. And according to the Disabled Women's Network, or DAWN, 58% of women with disabilities are living on $10,000 or less a year. My colleague from New Westminster, Burnaby, shared with this House what those high rates of poverty look like on the ground in our communities. Half of Canadians who are homeless have a disability, and half of those accessing food banks in Canada are also living with a disability. And that member dared us to imagine, what if Canadians living with disabilities were accessing the benefits they are eligible for? Benefits that, as we have heard, often go unclaimed, because the government process in itself is a barrier. It's costly, it's complicated, confusing, demoralizing, and a process, as I've described, asking people to prove over and over again their disability, their worthiness for benefits. My constituency office in Saskatoon West is a busy place. And as an opposition MP, you would assume we'd be busy with town halls, consultations, meeting with community members to change or improve or get rid of or introduce new laws and policies to make lives better for people living in my community. And you'd be partly right. We are busy with those activities. But we are equally busy helping people in my community access benefits that they're eligible for. We daily help people navigate the system for disability benefits because it's complicated and it doesn't work for the people it's intended to help. A common refrain of mine when hearing people's stories about trying to apply for disability benefits, and I'm sure my staff are sick of hearing it, is, but that doesn't make any sense. And that's exactly how I say it. That doesn't make any sense. One community member came to my office for help because although she was deemed eligible for Canada Pension Plan disability benefits and was eligible for her long-term disability plan at work, she could not access the disability tax credit. That doesn't make any sense. People in my community shouldn't have to go to their MP's office to gain access to benefits they're eligible for. And for sure, people should not have to resort to paying private consultants to help them complete a form. That really doesn't make any sense. This bill will ensure that individuals living with disability won't have to incur the expense of their time, and most importantly, their money, to prove their disability over and over again to different government departments. During an earlier debate on this bill, the Parliamentary Secretary for Sport and Persons with Disabilities mentioned the current initiatives the government is undertaking to improve the lives of Canadians living with disabilities, including the much-anticipated accessibility legislation. And to that I say, that is awesome. The Parliamentary Secretary also stated that the government supports the spirit of the bill, but won't be supporting Bill C348. Their main reason for not supporting this bill, as I understand it, and from my perspective, is that there is a misunderstanding of what the bill would do. So I thought I would use an illustration in the hopes that members opposite can find a way to support the bill and ultimately help those in their ridings who are living with disabilities access disability benefits they're entitled to. Filing your income tax is a one-stop, in a way, application for a variety of government benefits. You provide the required information, and using a checkbox, and your signature, you give various government programs the ability to assess which benefits you're eligible for. Your privacy is protected, and it helps public servants with assessing your eligibility. This is exactly what Bill C348 would do: cut through the government red tape and make the process more efficient. Having one application that includes the information needed to assess eligibility and a consent mechanism that allows various government programs to process the appropriate benefits, I think makes a lot of sense. And in my constituency office, we're doing that almost every day. In Saskatchewan, when someone is receiving the Canada Pension Plan disability benefits, they're also eligible for the equivalent provincial government program. Every now and then, we need to remind our provincial counterparts of this policy, but generally, it works well. It is often simply a matter of one government or one department speaking directly to another department to improve service for Canadians. And this bill isn't an either-or proposition. I believe the government can pursue the work to implement important accessibility legislation and support my colleague's bill. Both will have a positive impact and improve the lives of Canadians living with a disability. By streamlining the process, by having only one application, various government departments will be able to speak to other government departments and assess eligibility for benefits. This is both efficient and effective, which I think should be one of the big outcomes we strive for when administering government programs and benefits. I believe when it comes right down to it, all of us can agree that a person living with disability should not have to prove or demonstrate their disability to the government more than once. Not only is that more compassionate and respectful, It just makes sense. I want the people in my community to see their government, their parliament, as helpful and fulfilling the mandate of making life better for all Canadians. And Bill C348, as tabled by the member for Windsor Tecumseh, would do just that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.